Welcome to this special edition of the 3CL Foundation's Young People Summit podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Malia, and in today's episode, Let's Talk About Sex, we're going to examine how the digital world is shaping young men's sexuality, their experiences, challenges, and the unseen pressures that influence their identity, mental health, and social lives. Before we begin, I would like to make a point. This discussion does not aim to lessen the struggles faced by women and girls, nor does it excuse antisocial or violent behaviour. However, today our attention is on boys, on the lost boys of this digital generation, because understanding them is vital for comprehending the well-being of our entire society. Before we begin, there is a quick note that this episode will discuss explicit themes on pornography, sexual violence and online abuse. So please take listener discretion before you listen to this episode. So let's dive into the subject. I'm joined today by my colleague, Jacques Cordina, a Gen Z content and research executive here at the 3CL. And he has a particular interest in policy, multi-generationalism, and how technology is impacting society. So, Jacques, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to have Matthew Bartolo, who's well known here in Malta. Matthew is a psychotherapist, sex and relationship therapist, and co-founder of the Willingness Team, which is one of Malta's leading mental health clinics. So, Matthew, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. What a great introduction.
Well, I know you're very busy, so you are so welcome, and I'm really pleased that you're with us. So I'm going to start by talking and putting this whole thing into context, and it kind of came about in relation to the Centre of Social Justice report in the UK. And they released this report called, actually, The Lost Boys. And its findings are very depressing and striking and worrying. As a mum of a boy, it was a very scary read. So this report is saying that boys are underperforming in education. They're 3 times more likely to die of suicide, and they're more likely to end up in the areas of crime. So boys are reporting that they're feeling lost, disconnected, and unsure what it means to be a man in today's society, often retreating further into the online realm and away from social integration. Now, Jacques, I'm going to start with you, okay, because you are a young man and you have come up through the digital age. So I'm wondering, when do you think that the shift started for boys?
So I'm 24, so I've really sort of lived at least the late end of technology and the digital age. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, the most clear point, at least in my head, where things really began to shift, and this is backed up by authors like Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, but also a lot of others, is with the introduction or the proliferation, I would say, of smartphones and social media that came with it.
Okay.
A lot of the traditional socializing factors began to become mediated by these digital technologies.
All right.
And at least it's currently in vogue that this is really one of the key things that's leading to these change in not only in university graduation rates, but also in a lot of other factors, like when young men start having sex or when they get married, or a huge variety of life milestones.
So it's having like this ripple effect all the time.
How come it's causing it? So what do you think?
Well, as I said before, it's mediating a variety of different sociological or psychological processes. And so I suppose in terms of, it's a bit different in terms of university or, for example, when they start having sex. But, for example, in the case of having sex, now you've got the way that dating dynamics work has changed quite greatly. Or I'm told, I never really lived this era, but I'm told in the past it was very common that, for example, if you wanted to meet a girl, you'd go to a bar, strike up a conversation, and have a flirt. I think for Gen Z people, it's perceived almost negatively to do this, or it's much harder or much less common. So now dating is mediated through the dating app, largely.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that, actually. I see that a lot in university, this worry of flirting and talking and interacting. I see it all the time.
Where is that coming from? So what is the reason that people your age view it, and when you say view it negatively, in what way is it viewed negatively? Like
creepy, I would say almost.
And I've heard that phrase actually used when I've actually asked, young guys, 20-year-olds or 19-year-olds hear about, why don't you ask that girl out, or why don't you lean in for the kiss, all these kind of things. They're like, no, that'd be creepy. I wouldn't be allowed. I can't do that. And then it's all over social media, and there's this constant ripple, and it kind of brings me even to you, Matthew, in terms of, they're retreating in to social media for almost like a sense of community, and yet this sense of community is distorting their reality. But is there something else then driving this confusion, this fear? Do you see something else driving this
My
fear?
theory is that we are getting genders to be scared of each other. My theory is that it's very good and important to talk about consent,
Yeah,
but we're looking at it from a legal perspective.
exactly.
Instead of teaching people that the intent is important as well, creating the right space is important and the right atmosphere, and also reading the room. So if I'm walking towards a female in this case, and I'm seeing that she's moving back, every step I make towards her, she's making a step back, then obviously it's not the right time to lean for a kiss because she's not interested.
But that's interesting because in Jonathan Hyde's book, he talks about, this socialization of our children and how we change that socialization. And I grew up in an era where we played on the road. There was 20 of us the same age, boys, girls. We went to boys, girls school. And we knew the boundaries within each other. And we were almost like, as he describes, that little dog, running up and then coming back. You're nervous. How far can I go? And you did that just on social boundaries years ago, and you were able to test them, but they're not able to test the social boundaries here. And I see that a lot in uni, and I have a son in Gen Z, and I also see, sometimes, and this is what confuses me, I have seen, and I understand why boys are confused, I have seen people googly-eyed looking at, guys in class, or, and guys the same with the girls, or they're holding their hands, or they're lying up against them on a couch. And in my day, if you were lying up to some young lad on a couch, you can guarantee he thought he was in there. You would never do that because that would automatically show that you fancy them, that there was something on. But this is happening all the time, and it seemed like it's normal. So then when the guy leans in for that kiss or asks that girl out, they either get a slap in the face, and I know guys who this have happened to, who are pure gentlemen, I would add, or they're made feel like they're creepy, like you just said, creepy. So,
but isn't it sad to think that if someone is interested in you and he's or she,
so sad.
because we're being very heteronormative here, because we're talking about different genders as well, and the two genders actually, the male and female in this case. But isn't it sad that if you are interested in someone and I'm not saying push them against the wall.
No, of course not. No, we're not advocating that at all.
Talking about flirting with them, talking to them. Isn't it sad that we think of that as creepy, as dangerous? Because creepy is on the lines of dangerous.
Yes.
That's why my theory is that social media, of course, has its effect, but I think one of the biggest effects is that the pedophile of the village, which before there was one in every village, and we're only aware of that one in the village. Now we're aware of every pedophile in every village.
And yet we have our children a phone.
And because we hear of every case ranging from Kenya to Chicago, it all feels very close to us. So then we hear of molestation case every day from different countries. So it might give us the impression that it's much more common than we think, or than it really is. And then we're scared of every man out there. Like what happened we can see it even in schools, where you have male teachers who don't feel comfortable hugging their students. And sometimes even female teachers say this.
Yeah.
Because there's this connotation or this fear that it will be perceived as sexual harassment or
And in fact, we
sexual
have
abuse.
very few male teachers, and this is a big problem that they address even within this Lost Boys report and Richard Reeves and all these guys. They're all addressing this, that there isn't this a positive male influence in daily life. And I will come to this later on in terms of Malta quite specifically. But there isn't this male influence. There aren't that many male teachers. Male coaches are, they're really hard to get. They're worried about getting involved. And sometimes it's a cultural thing. Sometimes it's just a fear thing. It's a really unique place. Now, I mean, from our Irish point of view, we've had so many cases of, paedophilia, sexual abuse in children's organisations from the Scouts.
And again,
whatever.
when we say
But it's
many
escalated.
cases...
We had a lot in Ireland over the
Yes,
years.
but it's still not the majority.
No, it's not the majority. It's not the majority.
Obviously, I'm not by any way or means saying that it's okay or that it should, not be shocking. But it's not the majority of teachers.
And you're
who are
right. And I
abused.
mean, Jacques, would you agree with that we've just escalated this too?
I agree that, yes, definitely with social media, we now treat relatively freak cases. They appear to us as being much more prominent than they actually are. And in fact, child abuse within the Catholic Church is a good example, because actually, on average, if you look at it, priests don't really offend more than other professions, for example.
Much less than relatives, actually.
Exactly, yeah.
Much,
those are the worst.
When I say much less, like tens of percentages less.
As far as I know, it's that other males who are not blood relations are the most likely to offend by 3 times the next likely group, or something like that.
And you talk
they're
about
overwhelming.
family. That influence, even for men, is reducing within family, because we've got single parent families, a lot of single parent families. So that male influence there, the father figure, is not necessarily there permanently. That's more in America. It's becoming prevalent here, but a lot more in America.
Yeah.
And as I say, I will come back to that issue a little bit later on. But, you mentioned online, and, we see all these things online, and we're exposed to everything it's all in our face all the time. We're always becoming desensitized to it all. But that online situation also brings us into where the other threat is. It's like we've handed our children phones, where they literally can be on the dark web. I mean, I have an 11-year-old nephew who told me about the dark web. He knew about the dark web at age 11. I'm not saying he was on it, but he knew about it.
I wasn't much older when I went on the dark web for the first time. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not very difficult to do.
And that leads me kind of into this concept of, well, not a concept, but pornography and the perception of pornography and what we're seeing in our perception of news. So, pornography is nothing new, okay? But if the boys are retreating, if they don't have this influence, if they don't have these examples of, positive masculinity in their lives, if they're afraid to engage with a girl, flirt with her, wink at her, all of these things that we could do in the 80s and the 90s. So it's become more graphic. They're in there, they're caught, they're at home, they're in their own bedroom. And the research is showing that on average, and this, I nearly fainted, that the average age of exposure to pornography online is 13, and sometimes as young as 9 years of age. And 88% of pornographic scenes depict physical aggression to women, mainly strangulation. So at age 13, that's what they're seeing online. And they don't seem to have these other influences and these boundary tests that we have to show them that that's not right. And then in addition to this, and I nearly collapsed, that the CSJ report said that 50% of respondents said that they used porn as a coping mechanism for stress. I mean, how stressed are you at age 13?
Dopamine release.
And 40% out of boredom. And a quarter of young men are likely to watch porn every day or every other day. Now, Matthew, what are you seeing in clinics in relation to porn? Or are you seeing that in clinics in relation to porn?
Yes, and my main worry is seeing younger men, like in their early 20s, who can't get an erection when they're in a relationship or when they're starting a relationship with someone. And when we go into it, it's mainly either because they've just masturbated at home.
Yes, I've heard that.
So they don't have the desire or they don't have the
The mojo.
for it. Otherwise, also because of the performance anxiety, where nowadays it's almost expected to have sex on the first date, which I think there's nothing wrong with having sex on the first date. But if in the last 5 dates that you were on, and they were all first dates, you had sex with every different person you're meeting, my question would be, how come? Because when we meet people, there's chemistry, and sometimes we hit it on emotionally or intellectually, sometimes sexually. So yes, sometimes it's a good chemistry, good physical chemistry. So yes, there's sex on the first date. But if everyone you meet, you're having sex with on the first date, then it's not because you're in touch with your body and seeing how you're feeling and how they're feeling. Somehow there's this I have to have sex on the first date.
You're ticking
I should
that box
have sex.
almost.
And then if you're pushing yourself, and sometimes when I speak to these young men, they would say, I didn't really like her, but I didn't want to offend her because she initiated. Or because I was worried of what she might say or might think of me. Or because it's expected that I have sex. So at least I did that, or to get it out of the way. Then what we're doing is we're just trying to replicate what we watch on porn. And that is very confusing, because what you're doing is you're pushing your body to do things that you're not interested in. You don't want to do this. But somehow there's this feeling that you have to. And then your body obviously doesn't go that way. And what do? They come asking for the blue pill or the yellow pill, because they say, my body is not working well, and we are living in an era where for every problem there's a solution, and the solution should be given now. So instead of listening to our body and understanding how come, sometimes I say, your penis knows more than you. And it's true.
It's true.
Sometimes your penis is saying, no way, and you need to listen to your penis. Rather than forcing him to act, sometimes you need to say, why does my penis not to have sex? That doesn't want to have sex.
There's a funny Robin Williams, I think it is, quote, that God gave men 2 very important organs, their penis and their brain, but only enough blood to use one at a time.
But even in that case, if only your penis is working, then it's important to listen to it as well. Because sometimes our body tells us. Let's not forget that evolutionary, our senses were there to help us mate. So when we meet someone new, we smell them out. Nowadays, we're hiding that with perfume.
Yes.
We meet a person and we like them physically, and every physical aspect of them that we're attracted to is also representative of their personality. But nowadays, we fix this, we fix that.
And isn't it also that everyone is starting to look a little bit the same?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
I really find that, like, and I mean, Jacques has gotten to know me quite well now, working with me. I pick out the ones that don't look like everybody else. Like girls are all looking the same. Boys, listen, I sat in the university the other day. I was here in the arts building, and there was 4 young men sitting behind me. They were about 19 years of age, and I never in my life thought I would hear such a conversation. They spent 45 minutes discussing protein shakes, getting buff. It's all about buffness. Buff, protein shakes, how many calories they burned, how tight their abs were. Okay, 45 minutes, and in that time, and I counted them because I was really observing it all, 12 absolutely stunning looking young ladies walked past them, and at no point did they lift their eyes to the girls. Now, in my day, that was very different. So it's almost a superficialness that they have to be buff. They're all strutting around like the top cocks, but yet they're not looking at anyone, and the girls aren't really looking at them either. And this art of mating where you would flirt, or you'd throw a smile, or you'd wink at somebody, or that's not happening.
Sometimes I blame psychology about it as well, because we're teaching people sometimes to look inwards, but then I don't think we're balancing that out with looking outwards as well.
Yeah.
And it's important that you're okay. It's important that you take care of yourself and you set boundaries. But I think it's also important to remember that you're part of a community. In the past, this is going to make me sound very old, but in the past, we used to teach people about their responsibilities. And when you teach one person about their responsibilities, you're taking care of everyone else's rights.
Yes, that's true.
But now we're teaching everyone about their own rights. So we're not taking care of anyone's responsibilities then.
It's all me orientated. How do you think of that, Jack?
Actually, there's a very good book by Twang, is her name. It's called Generations. And in fact, she goes into what you're saying about how technology actually drives what she describes as liberalism, or prioritizing the individual, I guess, over the group. So there's a lot of this going on. I would definitely agree. Though there's also, I think, a normative element in that now the norms behind dating have changed, and I would say this is largely down to abundance. Nowadays, it's seen as, I think, or normatively, it's much more odd than I think in the times that you guys were referring to. I wouldn't know.
That's why we're so chilled and happy. Right, Matt? We're the only ones having sex anymore. It's great.
Malta's luckily, I think, still bucking that trend, but genuinely, in the rest of Europe and America especially, younger people are having less sex than previous generations. But
Less sex, yeah?
less sex,
Less
yeah.
sex.
Yeah.
Malta, not necessarily, I think, because we're a unique case, but broadly speaking. But yeah, now because of the abundance, it would be perceived as odd to not make, I think, maybe this is my perspective, but I think the norm is generally that you would go via social media first, make some kind of online connection, and then you would maybe do the in-person traditional flirting that you're
Which is
referring
okay.
to.
I mean,
Which is
okay.
there's nothing wrong with that.
Which is,
I
but
agree.
it's
And I think you
the
found,
steps.
Gen Z found the perfect way of circumventing rejection. Because if I'm just swiping right on 100 women, and only 2 of them swipe right, if that was in a bar, I would have been rejected by 98 women. But now I am being rejected by 98 women without knowing.
But you would have
So
been
which
able
is
to cope
great.
with rejection. And this is the problem. Guys are not able to cope with rejection anymore. And if you had chatted up 98 women in a bar and they all rejected you, you'd have to go away and think about that a little bit. You'd be mad. But at least you would have coped with rejection. So there's no coping with rejection either on a female or a male side, or an ability.
No.
Am I
w-
correct?
Yes, and I would argue also because of the fact that Matthew brought up earlier on that we're almost in a sense surveyed. If you get known for asking out many women, Malta's small, for example, so it's I had to go.
A slut.
Yeah.
Stud. Which are you?
Or even worse, someone who wants to be a slut but can't. I mean, it's
You're born in the wrong generation, Jacques.
No, I can't complain. I think in terms. I mean, I'm not complaining necessarily. I read
Stating
Matthew-
facts. And
Stating a fact.
and observations.
as much as I can.
But is it a
my-
generational thing? Sorry, Jacques. Is it also that it depends where you are on the generational timeline of Gen Z? So if we're talking about Gen Z for the summit and we're looking at Gen Z, is this like where you're based on Gen Z's timeline? Does that have a factor in watching porn and how that's affecting you with relationships?
What I think you're bringing up a very important distinction, which is I think sometimes overlooked in a lot of data, but is definitely there. I would consider myself on the lucky end of Gen Z. As I was growing up, these technologies were maturing with me, and especially the algorithms that, in my opinion, are mostly having an effect now. Those came towards my later years. So, for example, I Spin the Bottle was still a perfectly normal thing to play when I was 14.
Spin the bottle.
My sister is
back.
14 or was 14, and she looked at me like I was a bit odd when I brought it up as something we used to do. So there's definitely this gap, and especially we see it with Gen Alpha even more because now the algorithms are much more potent and often use AI technology, which learns based on their behaviors, and norms have had time to set in and change. So there is a big gap, and there's also another understated factor, which is the pandemic. If you were undergoing a very delicate stage of development around the pandemic, it's very difficult because you basically, I think, and Matthew would be better probably suited to explain this, but a lot of this development happens in relation to comparing yourself to other people who are similarly developing, and there's this sort of reflexive relationship between you and society that helps you develop your adult identity.
So is that why then, in relation to COVID and the pandemic, is that why then there was just this explosion of this online TikTok pornography in that time? I mean, it just, because there was nowhere else to go. There wasn't no ability to flirt over the, not that they were probably anyway, but to flirt or to, to hold hands or to ask somebody out. You had to do it all online.
100%. The same way how it's totally revolutionized the way we think of the workplace. I think the same thing happened in a lot of facets of daily life, and this is no exception. I think it really accelerated trends or we could see from before. I think it made it the norm for a lot of people who were 16, 17,
Well, was it drip fed? Because I don't imagine like young men are literally going out there actively looking for porn. They don't start that way on social media. I mean, is it drip fed through, games, TikTok, and then the algorithm figures you out?
I would use the word grooming. Because if you look at Instagram, where we moved from Facebook to Instagram, so it was more visual. And then on Instagram, we had videos and women posting bikini and all that. And obviously, we're talking about women because of what I'm going to say next. Because there's men as well doing this. But then we have TikTok, where you have so many women advertising what they can show you, and you go to their OnlyFans.
Yeah.
So that is, if you had to do that offline in real life, that would be grooming.
Of course.
So what we're seeing possibly is younger people, both men and women, both boys and girls, who are being exposed to this idea of glorification of sex work as long as you become rich of it.
It's the rich off it, isn't it?
Yes, and everything is justified as long as you become rich. And I remember an interview between Piers Morgan and someone who had an OnlyFans account, and he asked her, this is the only part I remember, and this is the only part I'm quoting. So he asked her about, what would your daughter say when she comes across these clips of you on OnlyFans? Don't you think it's going to traumatize her or shock her, or make her feel ashamed?
Absolutely.
And I remember she said, woo woo, cry me a river, at least she'll be crying in my Ferrari. So it's okay to do whatever as long as you are rich.
Wow.
And nowadays we go to schools where we talk about career paths and all this. And when we ask kids what they want to do when they're older, a big chunk of them, I'm talking about 30-35%, would say a millionaire.
Gosh.
So what before was a tool now has become a goal. Because before you'd say, I'll become a footballer, I'll become a dentist, I'll become a hairdresser because I want to help people in this way. This is my identity, this is what I want to be doing in my society, what I want to be known as or for. Nowadays, we don't care about that, we just want to become millionaires. Which then I ask, do I want to be going to a doctor or a surgeon who became a surgeon because he wants to become a millionaire?
What do you think of that, Jacques?
I would add a little nuance to that in that from a lot, because a lot of what I do is also to do with the workplace at the moment. So what you're saying is correct. People are more driven. People, especially this process in sociology, is known as rationalization. As time goes by, as technology increases, as you're able to depend more on yourself, and therefore be more liberal, in the term of individualistic, I guess. Not necessarily a bad thing. So now people are more goals-oriented. People look at whatever they're doing and they're saying, okay, what will I get out of it? And there's this constant equation of how much I put in and what do I get out. So it's true that one thing that they use this system for is money, but we're also seeing that young people are prioritizing ethics in the workplace, for example, much more than previous generations. Because this is also another form of rationalization. It's the same mechanism that you described, Matthew, but with the caveat that it doesn't only apply to money, it also applies to social prestige, for example. So I studied the social sciences, and in that field there's a great degree of competition for almost virtue signaling in terms of what you do with your career. And I think this is also a huge factor.
But I think it's interesting. You just said there about the goal and what I get out of it. Now, if I bring that back to relationships and to sex and to girls and boys, what seems to be happening is, and a lot of this also has to do with, the girl power, girl power. And I'm a feminist. I am a feminist. But I do think girl power has gone a little bit too far in some ways, and that boys have gotten lost through the cracks. And girls literally have a list now. You've got to meet the criteria. And if you want a girl, you got to be buff. You got to look like you're going to protect her. You got to have a good job. You have to be financially independent. I actually know of young women in their 20s who have a physical list and have actually shown that to future or potential boyfriends, and this is my 5-year plan. And it's that learning curve of, you don't need to have a goal necessarily at 20. You're not even giving yourself time to look at each other and learn from each other. But this is what I need you to be right now. Like, how is that going to help us all?
What worries me with that list and that mentality is that it's quite, in my opinion, emotionally immature. Because what we're doing there is, through rationalization, just focusing on the goals and the getting to my goals with the underlying, I would say, inflated sense of ego, sense of self, and not being mindful of our emotions. So, yes, I think when you ask a 13-year-old girl or 13-year-old boy what they want in their partner, they will have a list. Maybe not physically, but mentally, they definitely have a list. Because that's the ideal and that's where we start from. But when you're talking about a 20-year-old who still has that list and is not willing to adapt,
to budge.
I'm not saying accept things that she shouldn't accept. I'm talking about, does she have to make 10,000 a month? Isn't 5,000 okay? You know?
This is so no wonder the social world has grasped
Then I
boys
think that
then.
what we're doing is we're focusing mostly on our brains and not on our bodies. Because when we meet someone, and I experience this in my clinic with different people all the time, where they would say, she ticks all the boxes, he ticks all the boxes, but I don't feel anything towards them.
Yeah.
But if you've been so adamant of having someone tick all these boxes, you're not going to let them go instantly. So 2 years down the line, then you're getting into a place together, or you are into a relation for 2 years now. So it's more difficult to quit that relationship. So I think that what Gen Z is becoming and is, I think there's a lot of things for us to learn from, definitely, like attitude towards work, attitude towards well-being, towards taking care of oneself. But I think that Gen Z, there's a lot of things that they can learn from the past
As well.
generations as well. And sometimes I find that it's like we are, what's the word? Rejecting all of the history.
Yeah. What do you think
And
about
that is maybe it is our fault because we disappointed them so much that they don't want to do anything with us.
We were just great crack.
You know?
We were great fun.
I have to agree with you on that one. I think
We disappointed you so much.
No. Actually, I'm especially in the case of Malta. I think in a lot of ways I have so many more opportunities than my parents did. And even though my parents' reality and the one that they grew up in versus the one I grew up in, they're totally different in very many ways. And there are certain things like, especially sex and relationships, where I think it's very difficult to take them more credibly. But as I've grown older, I think this is something that I've had to grow adjusted to, and that even though a lot of the old rule books have been thrown out, the values and principles, I think, that have gotten us to this point are still, if not as valid as before, more valid now. And I'm very grateful for the fact that actually I have a good enough relationship with my parents, for example, that even though obviously like every other teenager, I largely
Rebelled.
very, very strongly and gave them a lot of headaches. With time, and it doesn't only apply to them. I mean, even the moment we have the reverse mentorship going with Trish, for example, and
My boss.
and you, well, equally you were mine in some respect. So I think that there's a great shame that the two generations, I think, really struggle to communicate to one another. On one hand, us, that there have been these shifts. I think that we don't, my generation don't do a good job of explaining to older generations that this is the reality we live in, that things work like this. And the inverse, older people have maybe at times dug their heels in also, I feel, or this is my perception.
You know what? Whilst I'm listening to you, I've been doing parenting courses in schools for the last 20 years. And I always told parents, kids can't understand you because they were never parents.
Exactly.
So you are the ones in that relationship who needs to empathize with the other. You know that now it's the only time in my life where I'd say the other way around.
That's really
Because
interesting.
if Gen Z are so emotionally aware, and maybe more open, then it needs to be them who empathizes with their parents. It needs to be them who starts the communication, the conversation. So for the past 20 years, I promise you, I always told parents, it's your job to understand the 13-year-old, because the 13-year-old will never understand the 40-year-old. They were never parents, they never had a job, they don't understand any of that. But in this case, when we're talking about a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old, who maybe are more knowledgeable when it comes to emotions and communication, maybe it's about time that they take the responsibility. And if they feel that their parents are stubborn or not understanding them, Why? Because even when it comes to technology and how we live, it's all very new for all of us. Yet, as you said, in the 24 years that you've been alive, you've been exposed to more technology than your parents.
And this is interesting. Sorry, Jacques, for jumping in on you. This is interesting because, I'm a 50-year-old woman. I have a son. He's Gen Z. We don't understand this AI companionship, this online life, this, AI bots telling you what to do. And it's all just a minefield for us. And I certainly didn't have an understanding of it until I came to university. We're a very open family. We're very open about all conversations. But it was the learning curve here because I was engaging on a very different level with this generation. I just became one of them. I just sat with them, talked to them. I was never sitting with anyone my own age in the first year. I literally was immersed with all of them. And I learned so much in that first year. But I can understand like why, a 16 or a 20-year-old boy or young man is going to an AI bot or possibly doing things online if the checklist is so long in that relationship that he's trying to have.
And if his parents have been telling him all the time
Exactly.
not to trust anyone,
Yes.
not to trust the opposite sex,
Yes.
to focus on his career before he
Your studies,
gets
your
in a relationship,
studies.
to have a bucket list done before he gets married. So we've been teaching this, and we've been talking about love as a vulnerability, as a weakness. We've been talking about don't get married because the legal fees to get separated are more.
Is that a Maltese thing, Matthew? Because I don't think we do that in Ireland. I mean, I know when I came here, I felt there was this huge pressure on kids to, to achieve the grade, to get this job. And there's a huge pressure here on academia. It's the whole focus.
Because
it's crazy.
we always looked at for young people, we always looked at relationships as an aftermath, as
secondary
as fun,
thought. All right, okay.
And then that's what we're doing. Everyone is focused on their career, on becoming a millionaire, or on having this lifestyle. And then when they are starting a relationship, the advice that they're given from anyone is to have separation of assets, so that when you divorce, it's easier.
Right.
So this is all fear of the other person.
But if you look at, say, there's this fear. Okay, so I have this fear. I'm not facilitating the checklist. I'm going to go online. And, this is just a safer sphere for me. It's a safer place. And we did an article on 3CL about this. And the stats were unbelievable from the US. Like 72% of teens between 13 and 17 have used AI companions at least once, while 54% of them use them regularly. They're not talking to girls, they're talking to a bot. 10% say the conversation, I loved this, 10% say the conversation with AI companions feels more satisfying than humans. I think my husband's going to get an AI bot. And 21% find them equally satisfying. Now, on top of that, we have cyber brothels where your every desire is met. You can have a checklist. You can send in your own checklist, So if you're not fulfilling your parents' desires for you to be the lawyer and you're falling through the cracks in education in school and you can't get a girlfriend because if you hold her hand or you wink at her or you look at her, somebody's screaming something. I mean, is it any surprise that young men feel so confused that they are falling into this endless trap, merry-go-round of I can't get laid, I can't get a date, I can't achieve grades in school, I don't know who I am and I'm lonely. Like, how do we help? What do we do, Jacques? What do we do?
I think that's a tricky one, and also is becoming more of a is almost a problem that has occurred. I'm 24. It mostly came about after when I was in my 20s. So maybe I'm not the expert on this, but I think actually the main thing is there's a small population of men that are especially lonely, and I think these are largely going to be men who are not super confident, who perhaps don't have a lot of peers with similar interests, who then on the internet do find people with similar interests, and then, with bots get this validation, which they really, I think, struggle to get elsewhere in greater society. But with that being said, I do think it is a minority of guys. I think it's just a minority. If you're looking at a social hierarchy, which I know is maybe oversimplification, or nowadays is maybe going a bit out of vogue in social science, but if you're looking at it through that sort of reduction, if you're at the bottom of that, I think life is becoming much more difficult for you, and this is objective. I feel. In that it's harder to get a mate. We see this through data shows that if you're a less attractive man, you are getting way less
Only top
attraction.
10%. Top 10% on Hinge are the guys who get. I mean, top 10%. That means the other 90% are lonely at home, masturbating on their own because they can't get a girlfriend. I mean, like that's how Richard Reeves even put it. You know, they've lost their mojo. They're at home on their own. I mean, 12% of women swipe right only 12% of the time. Okay, men swipe right over
Which was
60%
always the
of the
case.
time.
It was always the case that men are out
it's-
there hunting
but it's-
and trying, as you said, chatting women and trying to find someone.
Well, when you're
And
alone in
it's
your
doable.
house, Matthew, it's very different.
Exactly.
It's a bit demoralising,
That's why.
isn't it?
That's why.
I mean, their sense of self-worth must be crap. Like if you're at home and you're desperate for a date, and I remember listening to a podcast, I think it was the Diary of a CEO recently, and one of the people from Hinge was there. And they were saying that a guy would need to swipe 1,000 times for 4 coffees, potentially. And out of those 4 potential meetups, this is statistically correct, he might only get 1 date and they might not even turn up. Now, what does that do to a man or a young man's level of self-worth? I mean, is it rejection on repeat?
I mean, to be honest, on dating apps, I would argue this is I'm not the best looking. My statistics are slightly
I
better
think
than
you're
that.
pretty cute.
Thank you. But I'm not 6 foot whatever. Not I would say let's say I'm average. I would say that generally
He's a
in Malta-
fine-looking man, ladies, and he is not 6 foot, but he's got everything else he might need. There you go. That's your plug.
Perfect. Thank you, Rish. I need to get you on.
You pay me later.
So I would say this is maybe a bit of an extreme, at least in Malta. I think these things do differ quite a lot country by
Right
country.
now, everyone is Facebooking you and
They all know you.
Oh yes, I'm
to see
sure.
if it's true or not.
And he just got his hair cut.
I'll leave my Instagram handle in the description.
So no, everyone's trying to see if you're right or if
Guy. If Trish says he's good, he's good.
Better trust Rish.
Sorry, Jacques. Go on.
No, can you write the
saying
question?
how not good looking you are.
No,
He's
I'm
very
an
good
average.
looking.
If you do that now, I don't have a point to make. Let's go with average. It's best to set.
He's going to edit this out.
100%. This is. Can you remind me the question of what I was trying to build up
We
to?
were talking about why you're not being rejected.
Oh, yeah. Like, I think there are ways of managing your profile where if you don't lean into certain norms, it's going to be much more difficult for you. But equally, I know guys who just acknowledge that, listen, this is to a degree a gamified version of dating. If you don't play the game well, or if you might be a very outgoing person, but not be the best, most photogenic, and you would probably not struggle to date as a whole, but you would struggle on dating apps. Or even there's data that, for example, it's not necessarily how good looking you are, it's how able you are in your profile to show certain characteristics that people will definitely have on their list. So having tattoos is known as one of the best ways to up the amount of matches you get, even though it keeps your average rating on a dating site
Do
pretty
you
much the
have a
same.
tattoo?
I do, but only on
There
my
you go.
back. So,
You're not 6 foot, but you have a tattoo.
watch out, woman. Tame Impala as well.
What you are describing, that is evolutionary. That's what always happened. You always have the people who are perceived as the most strong in their society. So if we go to a certain part of our society in Malta, women would go for the buff
The alpha
guy,
male.
the strong guy. If we're talking about people at university, they would be talking about professorship or PhD or papers, Why? Because evolutionary, we always want to mix our genes with the best.
In the 80s, you just had to have a pulse.
I don't.
Ireland
think
is
so.
great.
I don't think so.
I think more than the 80s was very different in that sense.
Ireland was having a sexual revolution with Madonna in the 80s and 90s.
As long as you had the pulse, you had the
We're in.
But I think that the rules are the same. It's how we're getting to them, which is different, you know? So before, it would have to be having a nice car, having a mustache, you know? Whilst now it's having this kind of pictures on Tinder or on Bumble or Hinge or whatever. So I think that we look for what is the best. The problem I see is that because we have the idea that there's so many people out there, before, for my dad, who wanted the best woman from the town, and there were 10 women, half of them were her sisters and the others were, you know, available. Once he was rejected from 3, he'd say, I'd rather settle for this one, or otherwise I'm not going to have a family ever or not date. Nowadays, the idea that there's these hundreds of people out there, then we keep looking and we keep searching. Just like Netflix, you know?
Yeah.
When I'm going on a plane and I always forget to download my movie and then download the first movie I found, I always enjoy that movie on the plane because there isn't another choice. But when I'm at home and there's Netflix, I only give the chance of 2 minutes for every movie. And if I'm not really hooked in the first 2 minutes, I know there's another series I can start watching. Maybe there's a better movie. And I think that is affecting how willing we are to settle, because we have this perceived idea that there's so many fish in the sea.
I agree really fully with this. The perceived abundance is really limiting people's ability to sort of settle on what they want. And data really, I think, back this up. There's a good book,
The Dating Game?
The Dating Game is one of them, but there's another one, Datalytics, by the founder of OkCupid, and his whole thesis is exactly what you're saying. So in this sense, do you feel though that dating apps are crap? They're not fit for purpose almost, because they really work for the top 10%, but for the 90%, they don't function. But then again, I think about it, and probably it's very difficult to then compete with that from an economic standpoint, in that if this serves the best 10%, which are the ones that everyone really, whether they admit it or not, are likely to want, it's very difficult to then, I think, come up with another way of mediating it that adds some kind of constraint.
I wonder, though, what'll happen. Is this what's going to happen in a few years? So you're going to have the top 10%. They're going to get all the choice. They don't really care about the choice. They know they can have it. And then in a few years' time, you're going to have all these lads who are currently in the 90% who aren't getting anything. But the girls that are getting the dates and are getting that whatever from the top 10% will actually come back to the 90%, because they'll realise that those guys up in the top 10 weren't as great as they thought they were. Like, will there be this coming back almost, and then those 90% will actually be in with a chance?
Could be. Like I was taught when I was a teenager, never chat up the most good-looking girl in a group, go for the second one.
But you married the most wonderful, good-looking girl. Yeah, thank you. You better put that in very quickly there, Matt. You were going to dig yourself a hole there. Very, very big hole you were digging yourself. So we talk about, this, as you said, an evolution. And I always think there's a bit of a misguided expectation in dating and relationships. I mean, if this is like the Netflix swiping and, he has to have muscles or he has to look like this, or are they all a little bit misguided? I mean, are they all out of touch with reality, Gen Z? Go on, who's going to answer me? Jacques, are you out of touch with reality? Be careful, because it's girls.
Oh yes, I'm sure. Lots of potential. Better Tinder. Let's go on podcast, Trish.
Podcast with Trish. Get a date.
I mean, it's hard to tell though, because I'm a product of my generation. That being said, I have had the opportunity of living in Malta, the UK, and the Netherlands. And you can somewhat see in certain aspects, like liberalism driven by technology. And I'm really not talking about political liberalism. I'm talking about the value of the individual. And they're more globalized society and whatnot. And I did have this feeling of at times, whilst I had a fantastic experience there, one of the best 3 years of my life, there was this feeling of we are out of touch, or at least we're definitely out of touch with the people that came before us. I feel like we're out of touch with our environment, but I don't think this is exclusive to us. But I think it's more prominent. So in that sense, I do get that feeling. But I mean, also we've been saying since at least Socrates, for example, was quoted in also making a similar argument that basically every generation perceives the ones following them as being very different, and there's this cohort effect and age effect. So it's hard to tell, but there's definitely this perception, and I think I don't think it's controversial for me to say that that we definitely feel out of touch with what came before us.
But
I also think that underneath it all, there's our attachment style as well, and our generations didn't do the best job at it. Okay, because we are consumed by our own technology. It was the first generations where both parents were working.
Yeah.
So we're still adapting to that. And I see couples struggling because they're both still adapting to it.
Yeah, they're both stressed. And
because that shift also is forcing couples to try and find a way of balancing being parents and being career people and managing a household and managing all this.
It's overwhelming, really, isn't it?
So most of us didn't have enough time with our children. And that there's a lot of psychology and a lot of research proving this, does affect how our children are growing and how they attach.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was a stay-home mom for 20 years, and I was always at home, and I have a boy, and I always say to him, like, would you have preferred if I was out working? And he's very respectful. He loves affection and hugging. We would have people come for dinner, and he'll automatically give them a hug, whether he knows them or not. We're very touchy-feely kind of house. And even he would say, no, it was the fact that a lot of times the way I think and the way I am is because you were here. You weren't overly stressed. You were stressed with house and whatever, being a housewife or whatever. But he said it was very different, and he would have seen that with his peers, whereby both parents were working, and then the child would go from school to catechism classes, and it was almost like everybody has to stay out of the house until a certain time when mom and dad are back and available. Put them on technology to keep them quiet.
And when we say available, what do we mean? Because I work, and when I get home at 8, I'm not available.
Yeah.
Physically, maybe I'm in the same building, but emotionally and intellectually, I'm not available.
Yeah.
Okay? So people in my house are not having the best version of me. People at work are having the best version of me. So if I had children and I'm working till 8 every day, or even if I'm working from home, and I'm otherwise focused on my own relationships, my own work and all this, then my kids are learning that they're not good enough, that they don't deserve my attention.
Yes, they're worrying.
They're not getting validation. So then what they see is TV, YouTube telling them that they need to be buff, they need to take protein shakes, they need to shave their chest, they need to do whatever to get validation, which is then confirmed and strengthened by what happens online, where you get more likes if you have abs, if you have bigger boobs. And that's what is going on. I think that attachment and how our attachment styles affect a lot. And we are seeing a lot of people, the vast majority, who have an anxious attachment. Anxious attachment means that you don't trust that other people want to be with you.
Yeah.
Or that they love you, or that you deserve their love.
And then when you get the attention online, you really go for it. And that's kind of how probably even things like sextortion come in, and you're slowly brought in.
But even if you're in a
manipulated.
relationship with someone who can offer you a healthy attachment, then you don't trust them. Because if you feel that you're not worthy of love, who is this who is giving me the love? What's wrong with them? Okay. So if I'm not worthy of love of my own parents, because they prefer to spend time on their laptop or at work than with me, those are the people who made me. So if I have this woman who is in love with me and she truly respects and appreciates me, then there must be something wrong about her. And then we start looking into what's wrong with her.
Wow, that's really.
And if we're going into a relationship where we feel that we're not enough, then we're going to give very expensive presents. We're going to try and look our sexiest because we are not enough, so we need to make up for that not enough
Okay.
by making it up with money and with presents and all this, which is increasing more stress.
Yeah.
And if I'm not trusting that this woman is with me because I'm enough for her, then I'm not going to be financially loyal to her. I'm going to make sure that just in case she leaves, I need to make sure that I didn't love her too much. I didn't show her all my money,
Yeah.
you know? And when we have a relationship where we're not vulnerable with each other, because
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about,
Yeah,
not being
vulnerability is very
vulnerable,
important, yeah.
then it's not a relationship, is it? It's a
I do
partnership.
find that actually. I do find that with certain younger people that I've met, because like I mean, you know me, Jacques. I'm all or nothing, you know, and I'm bursting with if I love you or hate you, you know, kind of way. And I do sometimes find that sometimes, you know, when you say something, I love the bones of you, like they kind of, what is she talking about? And it's not in a romantic way, but they're just not accustomed to somebody kind of putting that spotlight on them and giving them all of themselves, you know, that I'm you know, this is what friendship is, this is what love is, this is what affection is. And I don't know if that's just being an Irish mammy or a characteristic of where I come from, but I do find, particularly here in Malta, actually, I have to say more so than at home, I would notice it, that there is this kind of sterile, oh, why is she so interested? Like, why are they so interested? Well, do you find that, Shaka? Do you find that with your peers, your relationships?
I'm not the most instinctively touchy-feely person, so it's not that, for me, this is a huge issue. But there is definitely, and I think things are changing a bit, but especially people from my side of Gen Z, there was a large incentive to be nonchalant. This is also something that's sort of backed up in literature, that this I don't care kind of attitude was actually quite appealing almost for a while. Of this, like it had this rogue element to it. This is my suspicion, I guess. But I do think things now are changing, and there is now, especially through the niches that have been carved out through the internet, I think, sort of this, it's cool again to have an interest, and it's cool to really be passionate about something. If someone who I don't know that well just tells me I love you out of the blue, I probably would find it a little bit on the outside.
Okay, all right, that's a bit creepy. But if it's, but you know, it's funny. It's
But
also
what's wrong
character.
with telling someone you love them?
It's like telling somebody that
feels
they're
this
gorgeous.
genuine.
I get into trouble all the
I
time
work
with
with
that.
young couples who would say, I hope he never tells me I love you because it's cheesy, because it's cringe. Why would it be cringe?
And yet
Let's
online
say-
they love to get likes and hearts and, oh yeah, Albie, you look so fantastic. They need the validation online but not in person.
And my theory is, and I am very sure of this, that if people have a strong attachment, they're not going to be addicts of things online. They're not going to give that like so much value. Get your friend, your child or a friend who's on TikTok all the time or online all the time, and give them a good half hour of attention.
Yes.
And let's see what they choose.
I was going to ask you that
Because I'm
actually. I was going
pretty
to ask
sure,
you how that works.
100% sure, they would choose human interaction. But is the human interaction available?
That's super
Genuine
interesting.
human
That it's really, yeah,
'Cause
the
we talk-
proper interaction.
Because we talk a lot about the attention economy in my field and the value of how these platforms are stealing our attention, if you will, especially of kids. But we really rarely look at the flip side, which is what you're saying of, well, how much do we offer that attention from the start? So I think that's a really important point, which is minimized at times in this greater debate of how we should be spending our attention and platforms maximizing our attention.
Go
'Cause-
to a restaurant. You know how everyone's complaining that kids are on their mobile phone? Go to a restaurant.
Old people are the worst.
We are the worst.
And you know,
worst.
apart from that, if it's two adults and the child is 5, if you're taking his mobile away, are you then engaging in conversations that involve him? Or are you talking about adult stuff that he has no interest in? Get the same child, get a board game, put it on that restaurant table, play with him, and we'll see what he chooses.
Very true.
If he'll choose the YouTube video or playing whatever game it is with adults on the table.
Do you think that, you know, this is more prevalent when it comes to the boys? Because obviously we started this podcast about boys and how they're getting lost through the cracks and their identity and their sexuality, etc. And, you know, if the boys aren't, because girls are pretty robust at times, you know, and we'll make our own entertainment and fend for ourselves a lot of times. I'm not saying that there are girls that don't, but, we have a different perspective and way of doing things. So is that something then that boys are really missing out on, that connection, that male connection, but also their motherly connection or their fatherly connection, of that spending that time with them, having that conversation, playing board games, fixing a bike, like those kind of things? Is that something that reinvigorates positive masculinity and their positive sense of identity, rather than losing themselves in the swipe or the TikTok or whatever every 35 seconds?
My impression, but obviously, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, my impression is that nowadays you don't really find male role models. And the ones that there are, sometimes, and females as well, but we're talking about males, when they do something wrong, then we throw them out because they did that one thing.
All hell breaks loose, really.
Because nowadays, because of this fear of each other, we are so scared of each other that the moment someone does something wrong, that becomes their identity. That's who they are.
And is that because it's all up on social media? Like, you can't do any... Like, I grew up in an era, God, you could do anything and no one knew about it because we didn't have social media. The neighbour twitching the curtains might know about it. But, like, everything these guys do is on social media. Everything. So they're constantly being judged.
I still think it has to do with the fear, because if I am afraid of trust... I find that Gen Z have it difficult, very difficult, because their nature is a social animal like all of us. So they want to be loved, they want to be in relationships. Yet, we have taught them that they should not trust others.
Okay.
So then when they, this is my theory, when they start getting close to someone, close not just intimately with another person like a couple, could be someone they admire, someone they look up to. That is confusing, because I shouldn't trust anyone, but this guy I really like. What he's saying, it makes sense.
Okay.
So the moment they do something wrong, that confirms what they've been taught, not to trust anyone.
Right, okay.
And I think it's about time that we start talking about Matthew can be a good guy, but sometimes do bad things.
Yeah, it's like I always
We're
say
not
that to you guys. It's
justifying the
okay to
bad
mess
thing.
up, like,
But even if it's a bad thing, like a real bad thing, we're not saying we should allow it and justify it and not punish it. But it doesn't cancel what he did in the past.
It's not the end of the world, as my mother used to say.
And it doesn't cancel the good things that he did.
Yeah.
So if I follow this speaker and he's really good, but then one time he was caught with tax evasion, that doesn't remove all the good things I've learned from this guy.
Absolutely.
But sometimes I get that then we just try and cancel that person. Cancel maybe that person, yes.
And is that like part of how we redefine masculinity, or is that just how we redefine social parameters for young men? Because there is this whole thing of redefining masculinity. Like, it is okay to mess up. It is okay to, fail or do something wrong. But we also need.
But is it all right if you're going to be creepy if you lean in to kiss?
No, I don't think it's.
I
don't think it's okay to be creepy. But I also don't think there's anything wrong with leaning in to kiss if that's what the signs have told you.
Is it okay to mess up if you're going to be judged if you lean in to kiss and it's unwanted?
Well, I think there's two people in that situation, and if one is leading the other on with all of the signals that is okay, whether they're curled up to you on a couch or whatever, and it's a regular event, and you go to lean in. I mean, you're not jumping on them necessarily, but if you can always say, "Can I kiss you?" Is it okay to kiss you? I don't think anyone ever said that in the 80s, but you could say, is it okay to kiss you? And then they say no, okay, then that's a bit of a rejection. Maybe that's the wrong move. That's a different thing. And I don't think there should be this, that act should then be put out all over social media, because that's what's happening. If a guy does something, he's blasted either on Snapchat or whatever.
But that's when it becomes the defining moment for that person, no?
Isn't it?
So if no one knows who I am, but then I lean forward to kiss you, and it's recorded by your friends, and you reject me, and everyone is seeing that. That's who I am to the online community.
How do
they
we
don't know
change
anything
that?
about that before,
How
no?
can we change that? Or can
What I'm hoping for is that it happens so often that it becomes normalized.
That everyone's leaning in to be kissing each other.
That everyone has a video of themselves which is making them look like a fool, because we all do that, We all do that.
Are you afraid to be foolish? Are your generation afraid to be foolish?
I mean, I'm biased on the subject, but there are so many embarrassing videos of me circulating the internet doing things that I really should not have been doing, or that do not make me look like a
You shouldn't
mature.
have said that. We just got your girlfriend an hour ago.
Ah, shoot. Hopefully they didn't listen this far. Hopefully they've got
It's on the dark web.
But we were early social media, so back then it was. I mean, especially if you look back at the things that everyone used to post, there's so much embarrassing stuff because we were still figuring out the kinks of the internet. There wasn't this as much of a normative force as there is now. I would argue, and this is specific to being an older Gen Z person in the environment of Malta. I think if I grew up somewhere else, it wouldn't necessarily be the same. But personally, I think what you were describing happened for me, and that there are embarrassing videos of me, and it happened when I was 15, 16, whatever. Maybe it's a bit upsetting at the time, but really, I think that a core part of my identity is sort of the ability to be seen as having tried a lot of things, having done a lot of things, and that almost people will look at these smaller things that you've done that are stupid or funny or whatever, and I think it adds to my character personally. Might be a cope, and it might be a.
No, but I think.
But I think a lot. It's common help.
It's like I always say to people, it's good to make mistakes because you learn from them and you can grow from them. If you've never done anything wrong and you are always the winner and you're always getting 5,000 likes, I mean, that's just not reality.
But if I've never met Jack before, and the only video I see of him is him calling a woman the B word, that's who he is to me. So when I'm going to meet him first time, this is the guy who called a woman the B word.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Whilst there are so many other aspects of Jack, and maybe that wasn't his proudest moment, and I don't know why he called her that. And
there was another side to that story or whatever.
And if I see the comments under that video, they would be saying he hates women, this is how he treats women, and all this. When really and truly, we don't know that.
As parents,
That's
Matthew.
what I'm saying. So because of that one moment that can actually define who you are, then we're scared.
But Matthew, how as parents, we've got these wonderful young men and they're trying their best. Like, how do we navigate that as parents? Because a lot of this happens, on a phone. It's a device in their hand, or they're in their room with their game consoles.
Engage them. Connection by seeing what they like. And if they are on their PlayStation playing, learn about the game, go see them play with them. Yeah, engage them in conversations where they are interested, and learn from them. Ask them to teach you things. And it doesn't start when they're teenagers. It starts when they're much younger.
Much younger.
You build a relationship when they're much younger.
But if you're at a point now where, say, you have a 16-year-old or a 20-year-old or whatever, and it's very difficult for parents to have these conversations, for some parents, not for me, but for some parents, particularly in Malta, it's a Catholic country, of a particular mentality. I mean, talking about porn is just like, oh my God, why? How are there tips that you can give parents so that they can engage in this conversation with the young men in their life? Because these young men, and we didn't get to it today, are like they're going into things like there's sextortion, there's online sexual abuse, they're being groomed. How do we engage in that conversation without coming across as being very defensive, overly protective, and yet wanting to hear their voice? How does a parent do that in this remit of young men?
The company Nike, they had this advert in the 80s which said it was either cushion your feet or it was either cushion the world or your feet. Mm-hmm. And I think it's about understanding that protecting our kids is being, I would say, it's doing them a disservice, because then they're not strong enough to be out there. So it's okay to see them cry. It's okay to see them go to different moments. Don't try and save them.
Yeah.
And have difficult conversations with them and be honest with them.
Make them feel a little bit uncomfortable. It's okay for everyone to be uncomfortable.
It is okay. And when you see that they want to quit something, don't let them.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to do things you don't like doing. It's okay to feel bad and have these emotions that are not pleasant. Because that's what life is all about.
Yeah.
And also for us as parents to have these conversations and ourselves feel these emotions with them.
Yeah.
So by modeling it as well.
I was just actually thinking, Jacques, today before we came in, we looked at, education systems in places like Estonia and Finland, and, they're very open and they're very media literate, and, kids know about what's going on in the media. And I wonder what you think in relation to, 3CR, we talk about media literacy a lot, and digital literacy a lot. But should there be like porn literacy? Should we be going one step further? And I don't mean in PSCD and those kind of classes, because quite frankly, they're not even considered classes in school. They're just, oh, that's rubbish. It's a bit like CASP in university. Everybody goes, oh. But, should there be porn literacy? Should we broaden that scope? Jacques, what do you think?
I feel very strongly that it's important, and even that there is perhaps porn that is easily enough available for people who are in the early stage of puberty. To model their behavior, so showing them how to maybe ask for consent in a manner that's maybe not as explicit as "can I have sex now?" or whatever, but modeling sort of behaviors of slowly building up to that. I think is extremely important, because if you've spoken to a 14-year-old, you're not going to stop them from going on these sites. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And even we look at countries that have put in bans like France and the UK, it's for nothing. I think it's a natural drive at the end of the day, and for the majority of adults, they can watch porn and have a totally healthy relationship with it. But things are these negative or adverse effects are definitely on the increase, and we do need to protect them. But it's a bit of a carrot and stick. We need to make extreme content less easily available, but that doesn't mean that you leave a vacuum. And I think this is something that policymakers are really failing with, and that Gen Z really can see very clearly. You're just creating a vacuum, whereas they see it as, no, we're
it's a bit like when you're not allowed something, you want it, isn't it? It's a bit, prohibition, you weren't allowed to drink, sure, everyone was drinking. Sex is bad in the Catholic Church, back in the 80s, 90s. Sure, the minute, Madonna arrived, we were all jumping on that bandwagon.
At the same time, we managed to teach kids not to eat sweets every day, don't we?
Yes, we did.
So how come we're not managing to teach them not to watch porn every day?
I think we gave we gave alternatives to sweets. If you're hungry, you can eat other food that you like, and it has to be the same.
There's no alternative. There's no alternative. One thing I want to say, which is we're running over time. We actually are over time, but this lovely gentleman here is going to let me keep going. I just want to say that in relation to all the various reports, I do think Malta is a little bit unique. And you're both Maltese men, so you can tell me this. I kind of feel that there is a certain level of male influence still in Malta. Like, I look at the festa and all the young men that are helping put the village feast together and all of these things, and the band clubs, and we've sports, and even within families there's the nanus, and Malta still has this kind of positive male influence, and I'm just wondering how we can promote that within Malta and remove it almost from the digital sphere. Or are we too late? Is it already starting to break up within Malta, this positive male influence? Like, do you see it's changed a lot, that it's more kids on digital, they don't want to help in the festa, the young guys? Like, how can we bring that in as a positive?
It's definitely changing.
Okay.
But I think we need to see family as a resource. And I think that's where we're moving away from, which I find is heartbreaking, because we see what happened in other countries, and it's not where I would want my country to go, because families are the best resource when it comes to mental health, when it comes to physical health, to social health. So I think we need to have better policies that protect the family.
Okay.
And make sure that we hear a lot of talk about making family court more efficient and making sure that separations don't last too long. Why don't you invest in keeping the families together to start with?
That's
or at least teaching that relationships can end, but you still have these responsibilities.
Okay.
And instead of trying to push the man out of the
equation,
when it doesn't suit us, I think it's about understanding that they are part of the equation.
They're a very important part.
I mean, we still have, I still sit across couples where the woman is certain and sure that she will have full custody of the child, or the child will be living with her. How come? How come we look at males as weekend fathers?
Yeah.
You know, or that when we are making decisions or when we are having parental meetings, we are shocked when the mother doesn't come, but when the father doesn't come, it's okay.
It's always understood. That
You know,
always.
how
understood.
can we call mom first when something happens at school? You know, so what are these subliminal messages that we're giving all the time?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, that's a really interesting point. What do you think of that, Jacques?
I couldn't agree more, and there's a wealth of data that backs this up. That even across a variety of social issues, and I agree with Matthew that. So, firstly, the family creates this fantastic safety net for all the different types of health that Matthew mentioned, and I agree as well that in Malta we've done a fantastic job of introducing a lot of civil liberties that have really made impactful differences in people's life.
Which were needed.
Which were well needed, exactly. But as Matthew is saying, it's a mistake to introduce civil liberties and then not recognize that you are leaving a vacuum. It's good that we have divorce in Malta, in my opinion.
Yes.
But we do need to help people to remain together. It can't be one or the other. And we see this with, I think, all of the civil liberties we've introduced in Malta, cannabis, maybe the exception being LGBTQ rights. I would argue there's actually been a good, from what I'm told, amount of external resources helping these. But I agree fully. But to end on a positive note on this, and there is some, and I agree with Matthew that I see signs of Malta moving, and I gave the example I've lived in the Netherlands, which are more globalized and technologically advanced, whatever. And I see things, I'm like, I really hope Malta doesn't go down that route. But there are some positive signs. So, for example, participation in Festi is still increasing, is still the main thing that people perceive as part of their identity. Fishing, actually, which is, at least for me, and I think many young Maltese men, is something you normally start with your father or your grandfather when you're young, is actually increasing in...
Oh, that's really interesting.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
I coincidentally had an interesting conversation with old fisherman who hangs around Mr. Fishing. He was telling that, and it is largely a way of escaping the digital monotony of life, but also a way of connection, of finding a way of doing things with other people, with other older men. It cuts across generations, in my view, and it's not just fishing. Fishing is just one that I like, and that's a bit close to home for me.
And getting more older people online as well.
Yes, I think that's a greater understanding.
And there you have the intergeneration dialogue as well happening. Because what happened as well is that the moment the family went on WhatsApp group, then the nano and nana are out.
That's true.
You know? So it's also about having our kids exposed to their grandparents. When they're younger, they're very exposed because most of the time they're with them. But then when they're teenagers, then we're missing that thing.
Yeah, I think that is very true, actually. Yeah, the older generation being, don't have to be educated in every form of it. But I also think that they're very afraid of it. And there's aspects of it that might be frightening, but there's aspects that are very simple to use. So the older generation having a bit better of understanding of how it all works would be beneficial, even in how to have a conversation with your grandchildren, etc. I think that would be very, very helpful. Unfortunately, we are well over time, but I just have to say thank you to both of you. We could literally have talked for hours here. This was such an interesting conversation to have. Matthew is going to be joining us at the Young People Summit. He's going to be one of our speakers, and if you would like to join in that conversation and be part of the Young People Summit, you can do so by registering. It's free to come for the 2 days on the 7th and 8th of November, and you can register online at 3cl.org, and we would love to see you there. It would be absolutely wonderful. So thank you, Jacques and Matthew, for your honesty and your insight. I'd also like to thank, and this is a very personal thank you, to all of the young men and women in the University of Malta campus, in fact, who have chatted with me and discussed this subject over the past number of months. Your honesty and your dialogue was really wonderful and kind of led to this podcast, if I'm being honest. And also thank you to FM 103.7 for providing the studio today.